Hi, I'm Radford Castro, and this is the review of the Nokia Lumia 925. The 925 is basically a cousin of the 920 series, which it shares space with the 928 and the 920 itself. The 925 comes in with T-Mobile being the exclusive carrier of this, but soon it'll be on AT&T. But for the most part, it's another Windows Phone 8 device, and I'd like to let you check it out. So the Nokia Lumia 925 actually weighs about 4.9 ounces. It has a pretty thin design, probably the thinnest of the Lumia lineup as we see it right now. It runs Windows Phone 8, as you can see, and its battery life is expected to have about 9 hours talk time, 18 days standby, and it has a Carl Zeiss camera at 8.7. The memory is about 1 gigabyte of RAM with 16 gigabytes of space, and you can do things like sync over Wi-Fi, USB, SkyDrive, 4G, it's capable, and of course you can do Wi-Fi calling. It's T-Mobile. So as you can see at display, unlike the Lumia's 920 IPS LCD display, Nokia has kind of went for the AMOLED line, and the switches really helped them, since basically at a 4.5-inch screen, it's using PureMotion HD, which is a fancy way of saying that it reduces latency on animation, so you can see that it's pretty smooth. And like the 920 before it, swiping around with the Windows Phone UI is fast and responsive, but that's part of why Windows Phone is Windows Phone. The interface really pops. Basically, what's best for your own preference really hasn't really changed that much, because Windows Phone hasn't really had this level of customization. But the big cool thing is that you can do color replication. The readability in sunlight was very good, and Nokia has included its usual high sensitivity options to enable glove use for less sunny days, and a glance option, which is enabled the first time with 925. And basically it has this night mode where you can set a trigger at a certain time to turn the text red so it doesn't light up your bedroom. Launching the camera is the same way as you expect all Windows phones. You just tap the camera button and it goes right into camera mode. You can see your previous pictures by just swapping back and forth. These are actual pictures that I took. Some of this is in low light. So if you notice this, this is basically a shot of Leo's hats in his office with the lights off. And so PureView actually allows it to take shots in low light. The other cool thing too is that when you take a picture, on the lens there's actually 6 lenses inside, and actually is suspended inside, so that when you're moving around there's not a lot of camera shake going on. It's actually pretty stable. Let me show you a little bit what that looks like. So this is me walking around outside of the studio, and it's actually, this video is running at 1080p, and I'm just kind of glancing around. You can see that as I'm walking around, video is pretty stable, and this is pretty much what it looks like. The twit sign on 1080p. This particular phone actually uses not a LED light, but something closer to a flash, what you'd expect from a real camera. So when you take a shot, it actually flashes. So that's pretty nice. The other thing to note too is that the downside of the camera is that it attracts some dust around the housing right over here. But for the most part, as long as you wipe it clean, you're not going to have too much problems. The next thing I want to make note of too is the battery. So right now we have 26% of battery left, and there's even a battery saver setting. It's estimated about 7 hours, but I ran this app called WP Bench, and I was able to achieve about 2 hours and 22 minutes. So there's definite battery improvements. Actually, 2 hours and 59 minutes. When I compared it to the 920, it was about 2 hours and 22 minutes. So there's definitely a battery improvement compared to the 920, but it works pretty well. During my time with it, I needed a charge at the end of it. The only thing that I have an issue with it is that when you plug this thing, it's plugged from the top. It doesn't plug from the bottom like most phones, or on the side. It's plugged from the top, which is right next to your SIM card and next to your headphones. So if you're playing it in your car, it might be kind of weird. Call quality is actually really nice, but it's expected for this type of phone. You don't hear a lot of the ambient noise, and of course the neighbor, or when I'm ever talking to my wife or a friend of mine, they don't hear the ambient noise coming from my end, especially if there are people in the background if I'm talking at a bar. So that's that. Before we get into the verdict, let's get into my pros and cons. The pro is that probably the most beautiful of all the Lumia lines in terms of thinness and polycarbonate design. It's a very cohesive look in terms of what Nokia is doing, and the cool thing about it is that this is the first time we've seen metal used this way. It's a very clean look. Also, the nice thing too, of course, it's a very good camera and it shoots. It's nothing close to, of course, the 41 megapixel that we're seeing from the 1020, but it's pretty darn respectable in terms of shooting things in low light. The other cool thing is that it's running Windows Phone 8, so you don't really need to have the highest specs to do the greatest things you want to do on your phone. And the cool thing too is that it has very good battery life. So that's cool. The cons is that you have a weird place where you plug it. You plug it from the top over here. And the batteries are not swappable, so you're kind of stuck with this battery. The third thing is that it doesn't have a micro SD card slot, so that's kind of a negative if you're planning on expanding the memory of your smartphone. And the con also is it's Windows Phone 8, so you're going to be a little bit behind in those apps. So if you're ingrained into Android and iOS, there's going to be some apps there that you might look forward to, but may not be there. So it depends on what you're using and how you're using it. But my verdict on this, it's a buy. At $30 from T-Mobile with a contract price, it's really hard to beat, especially with this type of camera. And Windows Phone 8 starting to catch it more with the apps. We're starting to see more third-party developers step up to cover the gaps like Instagram and stuff like that. But that's pretty much it. And this is the review of the Nokia Lumia 925. And Radford Castro, thanks for joining me.